Welcome to the Amaravati Today, Daily World News Roundup, where we bring you the latest, most important developments from across the globe. New York. A New York judge on Friday granted Donald Trump permission to seek dismissal of his hush money criminal case, in which he was found guilty earlier this year, in light of his victory in the November 5 U.S. presidential election. Trump, 78, had been scheduled to be sentenced on November 26. But prosecutors with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office earlier this week asked New York State Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan to consider deferring all proceedings in the case until after Trump finishes his 4-year presidential term that begins on January 20. Beirut. Israeli forces pounded southern Lebanon and the outskirts of the capital Beirut on Friday, killing at least 5 medics, and ground troops clashed with Hezbollah fighters in the south. Israel has pushed on with its intense military campaign against the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah, tempering hopes that efforts by a U.S. envoy will lead to an imminent ceasefire. Moscow. Russia said on Friday that Ukraine had returned 46 Russian citizens who were taken there after Ukrainian forces seized a chunk of Russia's western Kursk region in August. The painstaking and lengthy negotiations for the return of our fellow countrymen to their homeland have brought results, Kursk Regional Governor Alexei Smirnov wrote on his Telegram channel. They are receiving all necessary assistance. Port Louis. The Prime Minister of Mauritius, Navin Ramgoolam, who was sworn in this month after a landslide election victory, said on Friday he will keep the post of finance minister for himself to help keep the economy under close watch. We are doing an audit of the economy to see to what extent the outgoing government has destroyed it, Ramgoolam told reporters in the capital Port Louis after he presided over the swearing-in of other ministers. Moscow. Vladimir Putin's hypersonic missile carried a simple message to the West over Ukraine. Back off, and if you don't, Russia reserves the right to hit U.S. and British military facilities. Russia fired a new intermediate-range hypersonic ballistic missile, known as Oreshnik, or hazeltree, at Ukraine on Thursday in what Putin said was a direct response to strikes on Russia by Ukrainian forces with U.S. and British missiles. New Delhi. Opposition politicians from Indian states named in the U.S. indictment of billionaire Gautam Adani denied any wrongdoing on Friday, after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party said they had to answer for contracts signed while they were in power. U.S. authorities have charged Adani and 7 others with agreeing to pay bribes to unnamed Indian government officials to obtain solar power supply contracts in Odisha, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, and Andhra Pradesh, as well as the federal territory of Jammu and Kashmir, between 2021 and 2022. Moscow. The Kremlin said on Friday that a strike on Ukraine using a newly developed hypersonic ballistic missile was a message to the West that Moscow will respond harshly to any reckless Western actions in support of Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was speaking a day after President Vladimir Putin said Moscow had fired the new missile, the Oreshnik or hazeltree, at a Ukrainian military facility in response to Kyiv striking Russia with U.S.-made and British-made missiles this week for the first time after the U.S. granted its approval. London. Britain's Queen Camilla pulled out of one of the royals' most high-profile annual events on Friday night, as she continues to experience the effects of a chest infection that she suffered earlier this month, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said. Camilla, 77, was due to attend the Royal Variety performance at London's Royal Albert Hall with husband King Charles, but he will now go to the charity entertainment show alone. Ottawa, Canada, which expelled 6 Indian diplomats over allegations they were involved in a plot against Sikh separatists, denied it had evidence Prime Minister Narendra Modi was linked to violence on Canadian soil. The Canadian Foreign Ministry last month alleged Amit Shah, considered the number 2 in Modi's government, was behind a campaign of intimidation in Canada. Ottawa says it has evidence linking Indian government agents to the 2023 murder of Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. Rome. Same-sex civil unions in Italy rose in 2023 to a 6-year high, the country's National Statistics Office said on Friday. But at the same time, LGBTQ groups say the current conservative government is making life harder for them. There were 3,019 same-sex unions last year, Istat said, a 7.3% year-on-year increase. It was the highest number since 2017, the first full year after same-sex partnerships were legalized under a center-left administration. Budapest Prime Minister Viktor Orban invited Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday to visit Hungary, but several other European nations said the Israeli premier would be detained if he set foot on their soil, following the issuing of an arrest warrant for him. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants on Thursday for Netanyahu, his former defense chief Yoav Gallant, and for a Hamas leader, Ibrahim al-Masri, for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza conflict. The United States on Friday barred former Colombian Army commander General Mario Montoya from entering the U.S., citing what it called credible evidence he had been involved in the extrajudicial killings of civilians. Montoya has been placed on a designated list of people subject to U.S. sanctions, due to his involvement in gross violations of human rights, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a statement. Sony's India unit said on Friday it had secured the media rights for all Asian Cricket Council (ACC) tournaments until 2031, which a source with direct knowledge of the matter put the value at $170 million. Disney and Reliance, seen as frontrunners, did not bid for the rights, another source said on condition of anonymity. Kyiv, the Russian missile that struck the Ukrainian city of Dnipro on Thursday, reached a top speed of more than 13,000 kilometers per hour, 8,000 miles per hour, and took about 15 minutes to reach its target from its launch, Ukraine said on Friday in its first public assessment of the new weapon. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow struck a Ukrainian military facility with a new intermediate-range, hypersonic ballistic missile known as Oreshnik, as a warning to the West against supporting Ukraine's war effort. Cairo/Gaza Gazans saw little hope on Friday that International Criminal Court arrest warrants for Israeli leaders would slow down the onslaught on the Palestinian territory, where medics said at least 24 people were killed in fresh Israeli military strikes. In Gaza City in the north, an Israeli strike on a house in Shaya killed 8 people, medics said. 3 others were killed in a strike near a bakery, and a fisherman was killed as he set out to sea. In the central and southern areas, 12 people were killed in 3 separate Israeli airstrikes. Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will travel to Italy over the weekend to attend a meeting of the Group of 7 major democracies next week, the State Department said on Friday, amid rising tensions in the war in Ukraine. G7 leaders last Saturday reiterated a pledge to keep imposing severe costs on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine through sanctions, export controls and other measures, and vowed to support Kyiv for as long as it takes. 4 Italian soldiers were lightly injured after 2 rockets exploded at a UNIFIL peacekeeping force base in southern Lebanon, the Rome government said on Friday, expressing outrage at the incident. The UN mission known as UNIFIL is stationed in southern Lebanon to monitor hostilities along the demarcation line with Israel, an area that has seen fierce clashes this month between Israeli troops and Iran-backed Hezbollah fighters. Nicosia. A humanitarian disaster in Gaza is being deepened by a total breakdown in law and order, and the conflict between Israel and Hamas is rendering the enclave uninhabitable, a senior official of the main UN aid agency there, UNRWA, said on Friday. UNRWA official Natalie Bosley also said arrest warrants issued against senior Israeli politicians, as well as a leader of Hamas, by an international tribunal, meant there would be a reckoning for the suffering inflicted on millions. London. British police said on Friday that a suspicious package left outside the U.S. Embassy in London, which was blown up in a controlled explosion, was a hoax device, according to its initial indications. Police had earlier carried out a controlled explosion near the embassy building, a 12-story purpose-built glass cube in 9 Elms, South London, and cordoned off some areas. Beirut. Leading Lebanese footballer Celine Hayder is in a medically induced coma after she was critically wounded in an Israeli strike near her home in Beirut's southern suburbs. Her international championship prospects on hold. Captain of her club team and already included in the national youth team twice, the 19-year-old refused to allow her training to be interrupted by Israel's bombardment, even as her own family fled to a mountain town east of Beirut. Jerusalem. A petition by a group of non-governmental organizations for the Supreme Court to order the dismissal of far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has caused a rift in Benjamin Netanyahu's government, and could plunge Israel into a constitutional crisis. In a letter to Netanyahu last week, Attorney General Gali Baharav-Miara asked the Prime Minister to consider firing the minister, citing evidence that he allegedly interfered directly in police operations and politicized promotions within the force, threatening its status outside politics. The Hague. 10 pro-Palestinian NGOs asked a Dutch court on Friday to stop the Netherlands exporting weapons to Israel and trading with Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territories, citing high civilian casualties in Israel's war in the Gaza Strip. According to the plaintiffs, the Dutch state, as a signatory to the 1948 Genocide Convention, has a duty to take all reasonable measures at its disposal to prevent genocide. Baku. As officials from around the world strive this week to reach a deal on funding for poorer countries to tackle climate change, investment manager Rob Draukoningen is the sort of person they're hoping will help get them there. Draukoningen is head of emerging market debt at U.S. asset manager Neuberger Berman, which holds $27 billion in sovereign and corporate debt from developing countries. He should be a natural partner for multilateral development banks, MDBs, looking to find private sector investors for projects to slow climate change or cope with its effects. Berlin. The German government will carefully examine the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense chief, but will not take further steps until a visit to Germany is planned, a spokesperson said. I find it hard to imagine that we would make arrests on this basis, said German government spokesman Stefan Hebestriet on Friday, pointing out that legal questions had to be clarified regarding the warrant. Budapest, Romania and Bulgaria may become full members of Europe's borderless Schengen travel zone in January 2025, Hungary said on Friday, adding a final decision would be made at next month's meeting of EU interior ministers. Romania and Bulgaria, both European Union and NATO members, partly joined Schengen in March, after an agreement with Austria, which initially opposed their joining on the grounds they needed to do more to prevent illegal immigration. Washington. Astronomers have spotted orbiting around a young star a newborn planet that took only 3 million years to form, quite swift in cosmic terms, in a discovery that challenges the current understanding of the speed of planetary formation. This infant world, estimated at around 10 to 20 times the mass of Earth, is one of the youngest planets beyond our solar system, called exoplanets, ever discovered. It resides alongside the remnants of the disk of dense gas and dust circling the host star, called a protoplanetary disk, that provided the ingredients for the planet to form. Paris. France on Friday toned down its reaction to a decision by the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants for Israeli officials, saying it took note of the decision, which was not a ruling, just a formalization of an accusation. France takes note of this decision. True to its long-standing commitment to supporting international justice, it reiterates its attachment to the independent work of the court, in accordance with the Rome Statute. Foreign Ministry spokesman Christophe Lemoyne said in a statement. Quito. An affable honey cream Labrador retriever named Aldo is helping young Ecuadorian children relax at the dentist's office, allowing them to cuddle up and stroke him to distract them from noisy machines and invasive oral procedures. With some 5 years' experience in emotional support, 8-year-old Aldo understands some 30 commands and enjoys climbing on top of children sitting in his owner Glenda Aria's dental chair. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who were tapped by Republican President-elect Donald Trump to lead a new Department of Government Efficiency, have revealed plans to wipe out scores of federal regulations crafted by what they say is an anti-democratic, unaccountable bureaucracy. Getting rid of federal agency rules can be a monumental task, according to experts. Here is a look at the hurdles and legal challenges Trump could face if he follows through on the panel's recommendations. Amsterdam. NATO chief Mark Rutte is visiting U.S. President-elect Donald Trump at his residence in Florida. Dutch newspaper De Telegraaf reported on Friday, citing sources. Rutte flew on a Dutch government plane, the newspaper said. As NATO's chief does not have a personal aircraft, the alliance often rents planes from NATO allies. Hong Kong. Hong Kong media tycoon and pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai testified this week in court for the first time in a landmark national security trial, accusing him of endangering China's national security by colluding with foreign forces. First arrested under the national security law in August 2020, Lai, 76, has been held in solitary confinement since December 2020. He also faces separate sedition charges linked to his Apple Daily newspaper. Warsaw. Recent events show that there is a real risk of a global conflict breaking out, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Friday, after Russia fired a hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile at a Ukrainian city. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that the strike was a response to the US and UK, allowing Kyiv to strike Russian territory with advanced Western weapons, a move he said had given the conflict elements of a global character. Geneva. More aid workers have been killed this year than in any year since tallies began, the UN Humanitarian Office said on Friday, with most of them killed in the Gaza conflict. So far this year there have been 281 aid worker victims, according to the Aid Worker Security Database, which has recorded incidents dating back to 1997, versus 280 in 2023, which held the previous record. Vatican City. Pope Francis will visit Corsica on December 15, the local diocese said on its website on Thursday, in the first recorded trip of a pope to the French island in the Mediterranean. The short visit to the island's capital city Ajaccio, where Francis is expected to speak at a conference on popular religiosity across the Mediterranean region, will mark his 47th foreign trip since becoming pope in 2013. Peshawar, Pakistan. Angry crowds gathered in the remote Pakistani mountain town of Parashinar on Friday, incensed by an attack on an escorted convoy of buses, in which 40 Shiite Muslims died after being sprayed with automatic fire in an ambush. The Parashinar district on Pakistan's northwestern border with Afghanistan has frequently experienced violence between its Sunni and Shiite Muslim communities over land and power. Travelers to and from the town ride in convoys escorted by security officials. Moscow. Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov said on Friday that Russian forces had accelerated their advance in the northeast of Ukraine and had ground down the Ukrainian army's best units there. Belousov was shown in a Defense Ministry video visiting a Russian command post in Ukraine, manned by the Russian Army Grouping North, where he handed out medals for bravery. Bangkok. A second Australian woman hospitalized after drinking contaminated alcohol in a popular tourist town in Laos has died, the government said on Friday, the sixth fatality from suspected methanol poisoning. Holly Bowles, 19, died in a hospital in neighboring Thailand, where she had been evacuated for emergency treatment, the Australian Foreign Ministry said. Her friend died on Thursday in another Thai hospital. Berlin. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called the influence of tech billionaires such as Elon Musk over U.S. President-elect Donald Trump a huge concern. In an interview with the news magazine Der Spiegel, published on Friday ahead of the release of her memoir, Merkel said the job of politics was ultimately to balance the interests of ordinary and powerful citizens. Montevideo. Uruguayans will be choosing between two centrist candidates for their next president on Sunday, but the closely fought runoff could be decided by voters who went for an anti-vax radical and other fringe candidates in the first round. Final opinion polls ahead of the ballot suggest there are just 25,000 votes between the two candidates. Opposition center-left mayor, Yamandu Orsi, and conservative ruling coalition candidate, Alvaro Delgado. Seoul, South Korea has won international praise for its recycling efforts, but as it prepares to host talks for a global plastic waste agreement, experts say the country's approach highlights its limits. When the talks known as Incorporated 5 kick off in Busan next week, debate is expected to center around whether a UN treaty should seek to limit the amount of plastic being made in the first place. Kyiv. A Russian drone attack on the northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy killed 2 people and injured 12 on Friday morning, regional authorities said. 12 apartment buildings, 5 private residences, a store and 3 cars were damaged after 3 drones attacked the city around 5 a.m., 03:00, the national police said. Slovenia will respect arrest warrants for Israel and Hamas leaders issued by the International Criminal Court, ICC, and will fully comply. Prime Minister Robert Golob was quoted as saying by Slovenian news agency STA, late on Thursday. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants on Thursday for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense chief, as well as a Hamas leader Ibrahim al-Masri, for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza conflict. Seoul. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has accused the United States of ramping up tension and provocations, saying the Korean peninsula has never faced a greater risk of nuclear war, state media KCNA said on Friday. The comments came amid international criticism over increasingly close military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, and assertions that North Korea sent more than 10,000 troops to Russia to support its invasion of Ukraine. Dublin. Ireland would be prepared to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he came to the country following the International Criminal Court arrest warrant issued on Thursday, Prime Minister Simon Harris said. Yes, absolutely. We support international courts and we apply their warrants, Harris told national broadcaster RTE on Friday when asked if Netanyahu would be arrested if he arrived in Ireland for whatever reason. Nairobi. Heavy gunfire erupted in South Sudan's capital Juba on Thursday evening after security forces moved to arrest the former head of the intelligence service, according to Reuters reporters, and an alert sent to United Nations staff. The gunfire began around 7 p.m. local time, 1700, and continued sporadically for more than an hour before dying down, Reuters reporters said. Madrid. Spain's Secretary of State for Energy, Sarah Agusin, will replace Teresa Ribera as Energy and Environment Minister, a government source said on Friday, confirming reports in La Vanguardia and El País newspapers. Ribera has been appointed Vice President of the European Commission. The EU Assembly still has to formally approve all 26 commissioners, which is expected to happen next week. Beijing Chinese President Xi Jinping made a short visit to Morocco on Thursday, according to state media from both countries. Xi was welcomed in Casablanca by Crown Prince Moulay El Hassan, and the visit reflected the strong bonds of friendship, cooperation and solidarity between the Moroccan and Chinese peoples, Morocco's map said. Taipei. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te will visit Taipei's 3 remaining diplomatic allies in the Pacific on a trip starting at the end of the month, his office said on Friday, but the government declined to give details on U.S. transit stops. Taiwanese presidents usually use visits to allied countries to make what are officially stopovers in the United States, Taiwan's most important international backer and arms supplier, which frequently anger Beijing. Beijing. China will expand its visa-free arrangements to include Japan, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, Montenegro, and other countries, effective from November 30, 2024, to December 31, 2025, a Foreign Ministry spokesperson said on Friday. It will also extend the visa-free stay period to 30 days from 15 days for citizens of all 38 countries within its visa-free program, state television CCTV reported. Seoul. South Korea's National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik said Russia has provided North Korea with anti-air missiles and air defense equipment in return for sending troops to support Moscow in its war against Ukraine. In an interview with South Korean broadcaster SBS aired on Friday, Shin said Russia had given North Korea economic and military technology support. When asked what Pyongyang stood to gain from dispatching its troops to Russia. London. The Bahamas has unlocked more than $120 million to fund the conservation and management of its oceans and mangroves, with a debt swap financed by Standard Chartered and backed by the private sector. By spending $215.7 million to buy back Eurobonds and repurchasing an $81 million commercial bank loan, using a lower-cost $300 million loan from Standard Chartered, the Bahamas is able to redeploy the interest and principal payment savings to fund wide-reaching ocean conservation projects. Peshawar, Pakistan. Gunmen opened fire on passenger vehicles in a tribal area in northwestern Pakistan on Thursday, killing at least 38 people and wounding 29, the chief secretary of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, Nadeem Aslam Chowdhury, said. Among the fatalities in the attack, which occurred in the Kurram tribal district, were a woman and a child, Chowdhury said, adding, "It's a major tragedy, and death toll is likely to rise." Melbourne. India's Adani Group, whose billionaire chairman has been indicted for fraud by U.S. prosecutors, is facing accusations of racism at its Australian coal unit, after an Aboriginal group filed a complaint with the country's Human Rights Commission. The Ngana Yarbane Wangan and Jagalingou cultural custodians in Queensland state said it filed a complaint alleging serious racial discrimination by the unit, Bravis Mining and Resources, earlier this week. Washington. The Federal Communications Commission voted on Thursday to propose new rules governing undersea internet cables in the face of growing security concerns, as part of a review of regulations on the links that handle nearly all the world's online traffic. The FCC voted 5-0 on proposed updates to address the national security concerns over the global network of more than 400 subsea cables that handle more than 98% of international internet traffic. Beijing. China is willing to conduct active dialogue with the United States based on the principles of mutual respect and promote the development of bilateral economic and trade relations, Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shaowen said on Friday. Wang, also China's international trade representative, said China would be able to resolve and resist the impact of external shocks, responding to a question about the impact of potential tariffs from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Bangkok. Thailand's Constitutional Court on Friday rejected a petition seeking to stop billionaire former Premier Thaksin Shinawatra from interfering in the running of the ruling Pheu Thai Party. Political heavyweight Thaksin, the father of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, has repeatedly denied holding sway over the Pheu Thai Party since his 2023 return from 15 years of self-imposed exile. Dakar. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye's PACE party has won 130 out of 165 seats in legislative elections, securing a clear majority in parliament and a mandate to pursue promised reforms, provisional results showed on Thursday. Faye, who came to power in April after a landslide election victory, dissolved the House 2 years into its 5-year term on September 12. He accused the opposition of refusing to pass bills from the executive. A breach of telecoms companies that the United States said was linked to China was the worst telecom hack in our nation's history, by far, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee told The Washington Post on Thursday. Earlier this month, U.S. authorities said China-linked hackers had intercepted surveillance data intended for American law enforcement agencies after breaking into an unspecified number of telecom companies. Sydney. U.S. billionaire Elon Musk, owner of social media platform X, has criticized Australia's proposed law to ban social media for children under 16 and fine social media platforms of up to $49.5 million Australian dollars, $32 million, for companies for systemic breaches. Australia's centre-left government on Thursday introduced the bill in Parliament. It plans to try an age verification system to enforce a social media age cutoff, some of the toughest controls imposed by any country to date. These are reactions to the International Criminal Court, ICC, arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas commander Ibrahim al-Masri, who is believed to be dead. The warrants are for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, and Israel's military campaign in Gaza since then. The Hague. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants on Thursday for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense chief, as well as a Hamas leader, Ibrahim al-Masri, for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza conflict. In their decision, the ICC judges said there were reasonable grounds to believe Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant were criminally responsible for acts including murder, persecution and starvation as a weapon of war as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Gaza. Taipei. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te will visit Tuvalu, Palau and Marshall Islands in the Pacific, the presidential office said on Friday. Lai will leave Taiwan on November 30 and return on December 6, Deputy Taiwan Foreign Minister Tian Cheng-Quang told reporters. Kyiv. Russia fired a hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro on Thursday in response to the US and UK's allowing Kyiv to strike Russian territory with advanced Western weapons, in a further escalation of the 33-month-old war. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a televised address, said Moscow struck a Ukrainian military facility with a new medium-range hypersonic ballistic missile known as Oreshnik, the Hazel, and warned that more could follow. He said civilians would be warned ahead of further strikes with such weapons. Brasilia. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro plotted a coup to overturn the 2022 election, along with dozens of ex-ministers and senior aides, federal police said in a formal accusation filed on Thursday with the country's Supreme Court. The final police report caps a nearly 2-year investigation into Bolsonaro's role in the election-denying movement that culminated in riots by his supporters that swept Brasilia, the capital, in January 2023, just a week after his rival President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva took office. Ukraine's parliament has postponed a sitting due to have taken place on Friday, out of security concerns, public broadcaster Suspiln reported on Thursday, quoting sources. On 22 November, plans called for a session of the Verkhovna Rada, parliament, which included questions to the government, but this was cancelled for reasons of potential security issues, Suspiln said. Port EU. Prince Haiti's foreign minister met with the French ambassador to the nation on Thursday, over what the ministry branded as unfriendly and inappropriate comments by French President Emmanuel Macron, as he left the G20 summit in Brazil. Macron had on Wednesday described the decision of the Caribbean country's Transitional Presidential Council to oust the prime minister earlier this month, amid an escalation in gang warfare as completely dumb. Mexico City. Mexico has a plan to receive deported Mexicans from the U.S. if President-elect Donald Trump launches mass deportations of immigrants living in the U.S. illegally, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Thursday. Sheinbaum added Mexico was also preparing to show the Trump administration that mass deportations were unnecessary, emphasizing the importance of Mexicans in the U.S., including the value of taxes they pay. Washington. The Federal Aviation Administration said on Thursday it was allowing U.S. flights to resume to 6 airports in northern Haiti. On November 12, the FAA said it was barring U.S. airlines from operating in Haiti for 30 days after 3 commercial jetliners were struck by gunfire. Vienna. The UN Atomic Watchdog's 35-nation Board of Governors passed a resolution on Thursday again, ordering Iran to urgently improve cooperation with the agency, and requesting a comprehensive report aimed at pressuring Iran into fresh nuclear talks. Britain, France, Germany, and the United States, which proposed the resolution, dismissed as insufficient and insincere a last-minute Iranian move to cap its stock of uranium that is close to weapons grade. Diplomats said Iran's move was conditional on scrapping the resolution. Washington, U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen has introduced legislation seeking to halt American weapons sales to the United Arab Emirates until the United States certifies that the UAE is not arming the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in Sudan, according to an early version of his announcement seen by Reuters. Van Hollen has filed a joint resolution of disapproval in the Senate, while fellow Democrat Sarah Jacobs has filed one in the House of Representatives. Their effort is unlikely to win significant support in Congress as U.S. administrations under presidents of both parties long have viewed the UAE as a vital regional security partner, but would draw attention to a conflict that has become one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters. Baku. Division and discontent spilled into the open on Thursday at a UN climate summit in Baku, sparked by a proposal for a new global finance deal, which offered two vastly different options and left no one happy as the closing deadline neared. The key goal of COP29 is to agree how much money richer developed countries should provide poorer developing ones to help them fight climate change, a critical plank in efforts to limit the damage caused by rising global temperatures. Mexico City. Mexico's lower house of Congress proposed adjustments on Thursday to the details of a contentious reform that abolishes several regulatory bodies, aiming to ensure compliance with the USMCA trade agreement. The ruling majority, led by the Morena Party, on Wednesday approved the general text of the constitutional amendment to abolish 7 autonomous watchdogs, including the Transparency Institute, antitrust body, and the telecoms regulator. Beijing. China is willing to maintain communication with relevant parties and to jointly safeguard the security of international submarine infrastructure, its foreign ministry said on Thursday. Ministry spokesperson Lin Zhen made the remarks when asked about a Chinese ship in Danish waters and Finland and Sweden's investigation into the 2 severed fiber optic data telecommunication cables in the Baltic Sea. Lin said he was not aware of the details of the ship. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday that a Russian attack on Ukraine with a new type of ballistic missile was a clear and severe escalation in the war, and called for strong worldwide condemnation. "This is a clear and severe escalation in the scale and brutality of this war," Zelensky wrote on X, referring to a strike on the central city of Dnipro. Washington. President Joe Biden dropped his opposition to Ukraine firing U.S. missiles at targets deep inside Russia in response to North Korea's entry to the war, a shift in U.S. policy that took on added urgency following Donald Trump's November 5 election win, sources familiar with the matter said. Biden for months resisted pleas from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to ease limits on the use of U.S.-supplied ATACMS missiles, which can reach far into Russian territory, wary of potentially drawing NATO into a conflict with a nuclear-armed power. Berlin German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was set to run for a second term in upcoming snap elections after his popular defense minister Boris Pistorius, a possible replacement, ruled himself out of the running on Thursday. The news gave some relief after weeks of uncertainty over whether Pistorius would step into the frame with the elections just months away on February 23. Madrid. Spanish police have dismantled a gang based in the eastern city of Alicante that allegedly recruited Swedish and Danish teenagers to carry out murders as hitmen. Police said on Wednesday they had arrested a married Swedish couple and their 15-year-old son, who recruited other teenagers via the messaging app Telegram to commit murder, and are also accused of weapons and drugs trafficking and money laundering. Moscow President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that the Ukraine war was escalating towards a global conflict after the United States and Britain allowed Ukraine to hit Russia with their weapons, and warned the West that Moscow could strike back. Russia, Putin said, had responded to the use of U.S. and British missiles, by firing a new kind of hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile at a Ukrainian military facility. More could follow, Putin warned. He said civilians would be warned ahead of further strikes with such weapons.